Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast. That is, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with Mene Ukwe-Barua and Kim Strassel. And just to finish up on the fair tax point, Mene, Kevin McCarthy has promised Buddy Carter and others that they'll have a vote on the fair tax. Presumably, he will honor that promise. But how could he deep six it without forcing 222 Republicans to walk the plank on this on the House floor?
Well, the irony here is that a lot of the sort of arch-conservative members of the House Republican caucus have been demanding a call to return to what's called regular order. So basically, the idea that legislation that eventually is going to come up for a full vote should start in committees. And so it's possible that Kevin McCarthy could structure the vote in such a way as the responsible committee would have to consider it first, and that means only a certain number of legislators would have to actually get on the record with their position on the fair tax, and they could choose to kill it there, and that would spare the rest of the House Republican caucus from having to take a vote on the bill.
So dies in the Ways and Means Committee, much to the dismay of Chuck Schumer, a Senate Democratic leader, and Hakeem Jeffries, the new House Minority Leader, Kim, because literally they are out there every day. Chuck Schumer was out there today, even after Kevin McCarthy opposed it, saying, oh, this is so dreadful. It's so dreadful. I want to talk about it every day. And if he could, he'd talk about this every day between now and the 2024 election. He may actually keep doing
Even
that.
the President Biden was out there. They're going to tax your groceries. They're going to tax your gas. You know, everyone loves this. It's just a gift to Democrats. It made me think of Rick Scott and his plan, some of the things that he'd come out with that gave Democrats a target during the last election. And I'm just not quite sure why Kevin McCarthy. I understand he had to make a lot of promises to go along with this, but here we have a brand new Republican majority. They want to be talking about things that they can actually get across the line and show an agenda. And instead, this is the news cycle at the moment.
One of the wonders of the age politically is the extent to which Republicans want to make life easy for Democrats with some of these political kamikaze runs. But here we are. All right. And let's turn to another thing that could be a gift for Democrats, and that is Donald Trump's return to Facebook. Meta, the company that runs the social media site, says it's going to allow Donald Trump to be back on the site 2 years after he was banned in the wake of January 6th, 2021. Nick Clegg, who runs government for the site, Government Affairs, saying Trump will be able to post criticism of the 2020 election on Facebook, but if he starts throwing shade on future elections, he could be pulled off again. So, Kim, is this the right decision by Facebook and Meta, and what do you make of the implications?
Well, on the substance, I think it's the right decision, in part because they never had a very good rationale in the beginning. And we got a sense of that when the Twitter files came out. There was one entire string that was devoted to what went on inside Twitter in their decision to ban Donald Trump. And really, it was interesting given that the particular tweets they decided to go after him for, they acknowledged internally in the company that they were not a violation of anything. It's just that the pressure had grown so much, both from Washington and Democrats, but also internally from Twitter employees to push him off, that they felt they had to do something. Now, we've not seen similar documentation from Facebook, but you have to imagine that something akin happened. So never a very good decision. Also, the broader question about whether or not someone as powerful as Donald Trump, senior politicians, and now that these social media companies really are kind of the public square, whether this was just a good idea in general to kick somebody off these platforms. So from that perspective, I think it's the right decision. Now, the question about whether or not this is a political move and is going to help Democrats if Donald Trump comes back on, and the question of whether he even chooses to come back on, those are different things.
That point about choosing to come back on, Mene, is relevant because Elon Musk, with his takeover of Twitter, says Donald Trump can come back on the site, but he hasn't so far. So I guess a couple of weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, and that's because he's been sending out his messages on Truth Social, which is just a separate site that he recruited Devin Nunes, the former congressman from California, to run. but has not exactly taken the social media landscape by storm. And would he abandon Truth Social? And if he does, that site may go under. For going back on Twitter, I know he did send a request. He wanted to get back on Facebook, and I think he wanted to get back on Facebook in particular for fundraising. He wants to be able to tap into those small dollar donors. So that's the big advantage he sees there. I wonder if there is a larger messaging benefit for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fundraising angle makes a lot of sense. Facebook has a much, much bigger base of users than Twitter does. And the users also skew somewhat more conservative and somewhat older compared with Twitter. And so Donald Trump is certainly appealing to kind of his core base on that platform. And I could imagine a steady stream of fundraising pitches there being very, very successful. It does seem as if he has kind of lost his interest in broadcasting quick thoughts at every hour of the day, and compared with what he had before and during his presidency, I think it's an open question whether he'll be able to inspire the same massive minute-by-minute following that we all got used to a few years ago when he comes back. But his creep back onto these platforms certainly makes that a possibility again.
Well, and Kim, I have a view here that, in fact, this may be a gift to the Democrats. And I say that because much like Democrats want to run against the fair tax, they also want to run against Donald Trump. And I think to the extent to which Trump can bring himself back to the center of American politics and campaign and be constantly in front of the American public, with a possibility of becoming the Republican nominee, they're going to be thrilled. And to the extent that he comes back on social media, that will help that. It's really extraordinary. I mean, the Democrats now, even in 2023, every single statement they make includes the words MAGA in it. Every time they say these Trump members of Congress beholden to Trump, they're trying to bring him back. And so in that sense, what Facebook is doing is helping Donald Trump. I agree with you entirely. It's the right decision to make. And on the press corps, CNN and Morning Joe, all those folks, they've been bereft without Donald to enliven their programs and set their viewers a Twitter, as it were. So they're probably thrilled he's back, or might be back.
And I couldn't agree with you more, Paul, on that. The political point, I think that this is a gift to Democrats. You might be forgiven for thinking in this last midterm that Donald Trump was actually on the ballot when he was not. This was a deliberate part of their strategy, and it permeated everything they did, all the way down to, think about it. The January 6th Commission managed to just finally finish up its work, a couple days before the election happened. So it was very much they wanted to be front and center. And I personally think that they'll get their wish too. And here's why. Just because I went and checked this morning on Truth Social, Donald Trump has about a little bit under 5 million followers on that platform of his own. Now, put that in contrast, when he was on Twitter, he had close to 90 million. I'm not quite sure what his Facebook numbers are, but that is the difference between the extent of his reach. And I just think if you're Donald Trump, and we know he does like to be in the center of everything, that it's going to be very, very hard for him to not jump back on there. Now, apparently there are some contractual obligations that he is obliged to follow, at least for some period of time, with regards to his duty to post most things first on Truth Social. But that doesn't bar him from getting back on these other platforms. And I do think he's going to come roaring back. Now, just politically, that'll be interesting, whether or not some of his antics on social media, how they play in a new world where there are some real rivals to him, like a Ron DeSantis, et cetera, who don't necessarily use social media in the same way. I think it's a different world than it was 2 years ago, but that all remains to be seen.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's going to be very interesting to see how well he wears on social media now. He's firing away on Truth Social on Elaine Chao, for example, the wife of Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, calling her Coco Chao, which is in insulting her Chinese heritage and claiming she has all kinds of ties to the Chinese Communist Party, which of course she does not. She and her family came from Taiwan. So we'll see how it holds up. But it suggests that Donald Trump will be back on social media, and we'll see how it plays. All right. So Monet, thank you. Thank you, Kim. Thank you all for listening. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.